13. The world closed on March 15th.
No, I think it was
My birthday is the 15th of March, and it was the last day we were allowed to
David, are you speaking first, or?
Yeah, I'll just say a couple words and then
Cool. You want me to?
that's it. Okay, we're about to get started. So this is a really exciting moment for me because the last event we had in this space was March 20th. And the reason I know this is because there's a bar right across the street that that we all went to, and just looking it up to see if I can make reservations again, I called them up, and the number was disconnected. And then I emailed them, you know, because I don't let go, and they said, "Oh, we know that location is closed, but we have another location." But anyway, so long story short, you know, it's very exciting to have an in-person event. And unfortunately, tonight we only have space for like 50 people. So typically, this space was much more full, last time. So anybody who was here last year, yeah, that's great. So welcome for the new folks that just joined. We have kind of a packed schedule tonight. We're going to go one by one, and then we're going to walk over to a different bar that's open. And you're more than welcome to come over and hang out and talk shop. So I built this community all the way back 2013, and I've done over 120 in-person events. And I've continued doing kind of online events post-COVID, once or twice a week. But, you know, I realized that throughout this past year that people are getting a little bit of, zoomed out. And there's so much you can spend online, staring at a screen. And there's something to be said about rubbing shoulders with, fellow security professionals. And, so it's really exciting times to be able to come back, even at a limited capacity, come back to, kind of the real world event. So welcome. And thank you very much for taking the time and actually, making the effort to show up here in person. So, and again, unlike Zoom, feel free to raise your hands. We're all here, ask questions, and make this interactive as possible. We have 3 not too long sessions tonight. And again, they're going to be back to back. I typically trying to condense it so we can go after and have a drink. So first, to get started, we have Keith here from Critical Starts.
Hello, everybody.
And I know Keith from past events, and he's like probably the biggest guy in the room here.
What makes you say that?
And he's also a martial art expert, just so you guys know. Anyway, go ahead, Keith.
Well, he's gave away part of my background already. Thank you all so much for coming. This is a very meaningful event to me. To be able to be back in person, we're all here. That's awesome. Number one, getting the community back together, fantastic. So I'm grateful for everybody who came and everybody who's watching. And hopefully, I know I'm tall. I hope the camera is getting my head, David, but we'll see when we get the complaints later. It's missing my head? Is it so not getting my head? Can everybody see my head? We'll see. I'm from Critical Start. How many of you have heard of Critical Start? I'm going to call my marketing department. I'm very happy right now. Can I see that one more time?
I know Cecil.
That's awesome. So you know Cecil. You know Cecil?
He's kind of prolific on social media.
You don't know Cecil? Who do you guys know? Cool. Perfect. Well, for everybody else, Critical Start is a security operations center in the managed detection and response space. And tonight I want to just talk a little bit. I think I'm not going to do a bunch of slides. It will be very limited, probably 2 slides total. First about me, my background, why am I here? So 18 years or so on Wall Street. That's where I come from. All right. I only entered the industry about 3 years ago. And when I was on Wall Street, I was a banker, a trader, and an entrepreneur, constantly giving advice, helping companies grow and get through that, kind of the growth curve. That's where I would fit in frequently. And Wall Street was great. It was fast. It was exciting. You have to learn quick and become as smart as you can. And you're always talking to people that are just a little bit smarter than you, who you're trying to engage with on the products. But that's fine, and that's great. The other part of my life, as David mentioned, is martial arts. I trained as a kid on and off. When I graduated college, I ended up taking it very seriously and excelled to become an instructor in combat martial arts. And it's something I still train in today. And if you're probably wondering which ones, I trained a lot of different systems and then ended up in one actually based out of New York called PFM. It's been rebranded.
So you're going to demo at the bar, right?
At the bar, I'm going to do some backflips, no problem. But how does this all make sense for cybersecurity? It kind of meshed, and I remember it was such a bizarre experience. I'm sitting in my office on Wall Street, I don't know, 3.5 years ago, and I was working on a project in cybersecurity. I'm learning about all the challenges and all the solutions and all it just blew me away. It was really amazing. And then look, the martial artist side of me, to be able to defend and protect and use my skill sets from Wall Street. Something clicked inside, and it was just one of those moments where I was like, I'm leaving this industry and I'm going into cybersecurity. And I was shocking myself. It was almost like talking myself into it that this is what I wanted to do. But to me, I needed to find a place that not only met the needs of being able to grow an organization and being part of something great, but an organization that had the integrity and was making measurable differences for its customers, or else it's not worth it to me. That's my value set. And cybersecurity gave me the ability to fulfill me for who I am, which I'm forever grateful for. And I think it's awesome. I'm sure I see a bunch of you shaking your heads. You could probably have that sense also. And on that note, David, I want to thank you, because when I first was trying to break into this industry, I said, I got to learn everything. I got to get the certificates. I got to meet everybody. And this is one of the first groups that I joined. And here I am now, 3 years later, on stage talking to you. So thank you, David. So what are we going to talk about today? I'm going to talk about a story about somebody who's become a pretty good friend of mine. The story starts uncomfortable and has a happy ending, giving it away now. And it all tie together. So here's the situation. Enterprise company, global company, between a $10 and $11 billion market cap, has a security incident. Stock drops, shareholders lose about $400 million. Everybody's panicked. This is not a good situation. Where do I enter? Fast forward a little bit. Incident response teams have already come in. I'm not going to disclose any names, obviously. The CISO is holding a report, and it's time to go over with the CIO to figure out the plan, kind of a little bit of what happened, but more importantly, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again, right? Because in security, that's kind of the name of the game. We want to have confidence. We want to feel good. We want to feel secure. At this moment in time, both the CIO and the CISO are not feeling very good. You can imagine the thickness in the air, right? Like, this is one of those conversations where you're dealing with a mess. The board knows about it. Every employee knows about it. All the shareholders know about it. And right now, it's the moment in time where decisions have to be made that impact everybody in the company, the shareholders, the stakeholders, the team, that security team. Will we have jobs moving forward? It's a moment. Is everybody understanding what I'm saying so far? Am I being clear? Shaking heads. Good. Perfect. So this is kind of how the conversation went. The CIO turns to the CISO and says, all right, well, the incident's over. It's cleaned up. Now what? I need to go back and speak to the board. I need to go back and give the confidence that we will be all right, that life will be normal. This won't happen again. Talk to me about what happened. Tell me about this issue, and what are we going to do to solve it? Now, the CISO's sitting there and literally thinking about, oh, I have 15 people on my team right now. Like, I got to do a good job, and I have to give the right answers, but I got to give the honest answers, right? Nobody wants to be fluffed about security. Like, at this point in time, we must make good decisions. So the CIO is looking at the CISO again. The CISO turns to him and says, well, it turns out we actually detected this attack for the most part. I was like, what does that mean? What do you mean for the most part we detected it? Well, we have a large network. We made a decision to buy 3 of the leading endpoint and endpoint detection and response tools on the market. We verified it over with Gartner and this and that, and these were the best. 2 of the tools detected the threat, and 1 of them did not. Really? How could that be? Is it that tool's not, the third tool's not so great? CISO looks at him and says, no. And now he's starting to sweat a little bit. Is like, doesn't want to say the next line. What does he say? Well, we actually chatted with our managed service provider, who's, the team assisting them with alerts, response, et cetera. And, 2 of those tools, they're not very noisy. And, we could accept the alerts that come in from here. This one, oh my God, I was seeing so much data that it didn't even matter. And the truth of the matter is we probably weren't even looking at the low alerts anyways. The CIA is saying, hold up. We spent how much money on these tools? We invest how much money into this team? We provide training for everybody here, and you guys are telling me that you're not getting the workload done? And CISO's sitting there like, come sit in my shoes for 5 minutes and then ask me that question again. Like shaking their heads. You know what I'm talking about, right? So the CISO looks back and says, it's not achievable. It's not possible for us to get to everything. And the CIO looks back and says, make it possible. Make it happen. We need to figure this out. There's got to be a widget out there. There's got to be a solution. There's got to be a service. There's got to be something that can solve the problem in this industry that us security professionals just accept as risk. Now I'm going to pause for a sec. So the CISO has been challenged, right? Achieve what has been known to be as the unachievable. Well, the good news is the CIO authorized budget. Whatever you need, get this done, and go reach out to your network, right? Figure this out. What is the solution? We can't just allow a current state of accepting risk when we just had a security incident on a low alert. It became a problem. It cost $400 million. What do we do? So the CISO ends up reaching out to his trusted network, his advisors, AKA his resellers, and who then reaches out to me at Critical Start, right? And this guy, the reseller, his name's Dave, great guy, awesome at connecting the dots, but he's not like the most technical guy. And he's also, I know, it's that vendor reseller relationship. They're speaking to a lot of people, so he's not always going to know all the answers, but he can put it together. And that's the person I want to work with often because they know how to find solutions. So his name's Dave. Dave calls me. He says, Keith, he's all frantic, right? Like panicked. His nervous energy is coming from the phone call he got from the CISO who just walked out of the room with the CIO. So it's kind of like translating onto our call, right? That's you shaking your head. You understand what I'm talking about? Okay. Unfortunately, yeah. So Dave was like, Keith, I got a potential opportunity, but it's a big problem that I got to solve, and I'm just not sure. I'm like, spit it out. Talk to me. What's up? Can I ask you some qualifying questions before I tell you the company is? I said, absolutely. So Dave says, I need a solution that can resolve every single alert for my customers' tools. I said, Dave, well, that's exactly what we do. You did come to the right place. Shock. Yes, Critical Start will resolve every single alert We don't ignore anything. There's no risk left over. That is an actual fact. So Dave's like, okay, great. But my customer has 3 different security tools that they're using. Can you take everything in and look at everything together? I haven't found another provider that can do it. Now I'm like sitting to myself like, Dave, we closed a deal together not too long ago. You must have totally forgotten everything we do. Yes, we support 6 endpoint tools, endpoint and EDR tools, and 3 SIM tools we've added. He's like, I hear like the calmness in his voice a little bit, like I'm getting there. I have the solution. So Dave's like, okay. Well, the customer's tracking metrics for mean time to detect, and the industry sits around 100 days. They were very proud of averaging between 60 and 70 days for mean time to detect. What are you at? And I'm like, for every alert? He's like, yeah, now I'm toying with him a little bit because he should already know this, right? We've done business together. Doesn't always work out that way, though. So he says, I said, listen, our methodology enables us to have a mean time to detect and commit it to customers in less than an hour. And he was like about to hang up the phone on me because, again, he wasn't paying attention to previous deals, but now it's an important problem. Time is of the essence, jobs are at stakes, and it's time to focus. I said, that is absolutely correct. So he says to me, okay, this all sounds, this sounds really great, but how do my customer's going to want to be able to verify that like the work's actually being done, and is there any methodology to see what's happening? What is the magic behind the curtain? Because frequent times in cybersecurity, I'm sure we all know that marketing is very strong, and then when you start peeling things back, it's not always exactly how it's explained. And I said, look, we know of that challenge. That's something that we addressed when designing this service. So everything is transparent. My analysts work in the same portal that your analysts do. That's the way it works. We said, but how am we supposed to know? Well, there's an audit log, of course. Everything is trackable. There's nowhere to hide. Everything needs to be transparent. So now Dave's like really calmed down. He's calmed, like his nerves are settling. And then he pops one last question. Can anyone guess what it was?
How much does it cost?
Keep going, one more.
How long does it go? Can I get it slow?
What's that?
When can I put it in flow?
When can I put it in flow? Now, the next question was, will you commit to everything you just told me? Will you commit? How many times have you worked with a vendor that says blah, 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 but will you commit to what you said? I can commit, Dave. We have a true serviceable agreement that defines that we will resolve every single alert. We define our mean time to detect and our mean time to respond. And if we miss it, we pay you back. If I miss it too much, you're out of your contract. I needed to be able to express to Dave and give him the confidence that we were going to do everything that we said we would do in those qualifications, and for him to obviously introduce me to the customer. I had to pass his test. Fast forward, we passed. We passed the test. We partnered. The organization ended up becoming a great customer. I'm hoping to be a reference customer sometime soon, and then I'll be able to tell you guys the whole story. But it's been a great partnership. About a month ago, there was an attempted breach. Came in, it wasn't a low, came in as a medium alert. We stopped it in 26 minutes. I said, say goodbye, hasta la vista, 70 to 80 days for mean time to detect, right? Stopping it in minutes, This is game changing for our industry. This is straight up a true differentiator. This customer's life changed the day we partnered. The organization changed the day we partnered. They went from being in a state of the unknown, in a state of panic, in a state of accepting risk, and accepting risk beyond what the organization truly wanted to accept. Reason why? I can give you plenty of them, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, right, of why we accept risk in the industry. But at the end of the day, if we are detecting threats, we must be resolving threats. And when you're out there and you're thinking about your lives or the organizations, anybody you know who's looking for a partner with integrity, a partner who cares, a partner who's going to give you confidence that every single alert has been looked at and every single alert has been resolved, who will be transparent, I want you to think of Critical Start. And I want you to think of me. Remember my background, where I came from. I am the face of the company here in New York, and we are growing, and it's going great. I can't believe how many of you knew Critical Start. That's awesome. That was really fantastic. So, look, I hope you enjoyed this story tonight. Did anybody? Can anybody relate to the story? Unfortunately, one ask. I have one ask of all of you. I'm very friendly. Call me. I don't want you to be the story. I want you to be the partner. I want you to have the confidence, and I want you to have success and an ongoing success. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, man.
My contact info. Here's my last ask. Sorry. My contact info is here. My new QR code, which I don't know if it's working, but this is my first in-person event. Somebody, there we go.
Works good. I think we should try.
All good. Thank you all so much.
So I'm like the the guy who you check into a hotel, and the person at the reception is also the room service. Because I had this is true story. I had Jobin who used to help me out with the video, last year, but unfortunately, and he was in cybersecurity. He was a recruiter for Barclays, and then unfortunately, one of his family members passed away due to COVID. They had to take over the family business, and so did a complete switch, transfer to a completely like a printing press type of business from cybersecurity. So unfortunately, now I do the video and the speaking and everything else. So if anybody wants to volunteer, for the new ones, so. I want to introduce Doug Britton from Haystack Solution. Let's grab a seat here.
And a clicker.
Well, we can change that over. Let me show. Yeah, you go in here and then you press play on the other one. This other presentation. 1 second. 1 second. Not going here for a second? Nope. It should be working already. Go back in here. Do you know how to change the presentation? It should be right on here. If you close this down. There we go. That's
there
it.
we go.
And you just press play. Perfect.
And then I guess this just power.
So what's interesting about tonight specifically is that we have people that are entrepreneurs in the space as well. Critical Start is essentially a startup. It's been around for a little while, but 6 years. But it's still, so 6 years. But I have the greatest appreciation to entrepreneurs in the space because it's so tough. I don't know if you're aware how difficult it is to enter the space of cybersecurity as a company. There are about 3,000 plus vendors, if maybe even more. And typically, when entrepreneurs start a business, they start a business because they're facing a problem that they didn't find a tool to solve. And I believe here, Doug, it's the same case with you. So why don't we start? You as a serial entrepreneur, why don't we start like with your kind of past endeavors, what you've been doing, and then we'll jump right into the problem you're trying to solve today.
All right. Well, thanks. So I've been entrepreneuring in cybersecurity for the last 10 years or so. I've been in cybersecurity for about 15. And I've been sufficiently successful as an entrepreneur that my wife considers it my actual job and not just a thing I say I do. I sold my first company to Samsung and then kind of went back into the breach. And But when I got into cybersecurity, when I started there, I realized that, whatever cool stuff you have, the real knife fight is over talent. And and I've seen people, co-founders in a previous company of mine, they're the Carnegie Mellon hacking team that wins DEF CON every year. And so I've seen what the right person can do in 5 weeks that other people for the last 18 years have said can't be done. And I've literally watched somebody turn orthodoxy on its ear in 5 weeks. So, and having been in those knife fights, won enough, lost most. For talent, I knew there had to be a better way. And so I just kept banging my head against that problem, which is pretty much what I think entrepreneurship translates into, is bang your head against problems. And I got fortunate. I saw some tech at the University of Maryland, and I'm like, wait, this is on a shelf? So that's kind of how I got here. And the banging all my head against the wall cost me my hair, but that's okay. It's really easier this way, I think.
So define the problem right now. Like what you mentioned, hiring talent, right? So what is the current status quo today within companies?
So, there's a lot of people. It's hard to separate signal from noise. First thing, if you open a rec to try and fill talent, you're going to get a lot of people that shouldn't be applying. And the other problem is that you kind of anyone who's doing hiring or anyone that's on a cybersecurity team knows that there's hundreds of thousands of people missing in the market. We could airlift in 300,000 people from a foreign planet, and they would all have jobs right away. So how is it that there's a mismatch? And how do you, we have this 300,000 person shortage, but when you open a rec, hundreds of people that have no business qualifying apply, there's a mismatch there. And when undergraduates with 0 years of experience are getting I've had people that 0 years of experience turn down $120,000 offer. The market's skewed. And so, that's all the forces are wrong. And so that's part of the problem.
And how does it relate to the shortage in kind of,
yes.
Every time you Google something about cybersecurity, you hear about these 1 million unfulfilled jobs.
Yeah, there's a handful of problems in that space. We're applying 1950s concepts of career matriculation to industries that move a lot faster and have completely different needs. And so we're literally, the demand for cybersecurity talent is growing faster than we're creating new, undergraduates or new graduates.
And I've heard somewhere that people also see that as a matter of national security, because cybersecurity is now kind of a warfare between nation states and so on, and lack of talent in that space also lends itself to vulnerability as a country.
Yeah, that was a gift for understatement. Yes, you could say definitely that it is a national security challenge, from the evidenced by the series of executive orders that are coming out. The fact I live in Maryland, and the Colonial Pipeline hacking, I couldn't get gas, and it was, having now lived through a pandemic, I was actually more terrified about what society was going to do when gas broke down than I was about the pandemic. And now maybe that's skewed, but literally I swear I was in a scene from The Walking Dead at 1 a.m. all the gas, and I went to gas stations 20 miles in every direction, and they were gone. And it was like, oh, this is bad. So, and I was like, even when the pipeline starts going, that much slack isn't going to just disappear. So, yeah, this is national security, lives on the line. No joke that we in the profession don't need to exaggerate this. It's that bad.
Well, it could have been worse. It could have been Black Friday. To watch that. So
Black Friday pre-pandemic, Black Friday post-pandemic, you don't need to drive around.
So tell me a bit about, you're obviously trying to solve a big problem, right?
Roger.
So how do you do that today? What's the, it looks like a pretty complicated
Yeah, so
slide here. Yeah.
let's make things simple. So cybersecurity, it's a myriad of professions all rolled into one, 5-letter word, cyber, or the cybers. And so and it's attacking, it's defending, it's analyzing. And the military kind of grappled with the same problem. They, for the same reasons, need to figure out how do we get people in. And so the University of Maryland undertook some research on behalf of the NSA, the Air Force, the Navy, and the Army to try and figure out, can we create some sort of cyber genius radar? And the way the military approached that is the way the military approaches many things, which is testing. So, anyone who's gone to elementary or junior high or high school in the US has taken the ASVAB, the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. And that is the military's early radar for who could do this. So some of the commanding generals and some of the leading admirals are like, I need the ASVAB for cyber. So, and the same group of people that have developed a bunch of the language, I was a military linguist, and the same group of people who have developed a bunch of the language training and the language analyses said, I can solve your cybers problem. But unlike learning a language, it's not a simple unidimensional answer. Yes, no, can learn language. It is, does this person have a brain for this part of the cybers or this part? And so the analytical framework that the University in Maryland came up with was what we see here. And so let me briefly describe it. So the thing that brings the professions together and puts them on one sort of roadmap is this. Does the job require, the north-south dimension here is initiating versus responding. And you can think of that as, is this person, do they have the cognitive muscle tissue to be the person who kicks down the door, or the person who's on the other side of the door that's going to get kicked down, you just don't know when. But you know that if someone's coming, they're coming through this door, or the one right next to it. But you're on the defensive side, maintaining perseverance or maintaining vigilance. And these are two different mental disciplines. Now, you might be strong at both, or you might be strong at one. All right, so that's the north-south. So east-west, we have real-time versus exhaustive. And this goes to your decision-making, time frame, and risk tolerance. So are you a person that is comfortable making decisions with limited information, but a decision has to be made? You've got 30 seconds, maybe 5 minutes to make a decision. You go in knowing you have incomplete information, you have conflicting information, and you're still going to take responsibility for making a decision. All right, that's one type of mental muscle. Now, at the other end of that spectrum is somebody whose mental muscle is avoiding decision making. And that may sound ridiculous, but it's actually a separate skill to not jump to a conclusion, to say, no, I need more data. And in some professions, you have the time to analyze and get that extra data. So that's our real-time decision-making versus exhaustive. Now, when you put these on a very nice quadrant, a very nice map, what you get is those who are strong at initiating mental disciplines and strong at real-time, they are your great offensive operators, pen testers, cyber warfare, things like that. Those that are strong at real-time and strong at responding, these are great defensive operators. This is someone who's going to be good in the SOC, going to be good at that hand-to-hand combat of what someone else is doing and figuring out what is the next thing I should do. Strong at responding and strong at exhaustive is someone that's going to be really strong at forensics and analysis. This is going to be someone who's looking at a dead body and like, okay, what am I analyzing here? What am I pulling apart? What is the fingerprint I'm looking for? And knowing how to stitch that analytical story together. And then strong at initiating and strong at exhaustive would be the people who are good at looking into the void and saying, what should be here? These are builders and designers that are able to say, we're under attack now, but if we made the wall 10 feet higher or 10 feet thicker or 10 feet deeper, or we change the composition of the guard here or here, that would be, someone who's capable of filling in that kind of design. So our body of work was the analysis, and I can flip through some of the tests, and there's a QR code that's on our business card and is at the end of this that anyone can sign up and just take 3 of the tests and try it. But our body of work, coalesces around, these 15 tests that analyze these dimensions, and also 5 tests that focus on critical thinking. And critical thinking is kind of the glue that makes all of these stronger. It's not predictive in any one dimension, but it's like nitrous for your car. It means that you're able, to think faster. And so it helps, across the board. So,
A quick question.
Yeah.
So can somebody take this as a self-assessment to see what job they should apply to?
Yeah, and our buyers are multifaceted. We have hiring managers, so the actual practitioners who are figuring out who to bring onto their team. We have HR and talent managers who are working with the hiring managers that are trying to sort through the 100 resumes and separate, take the fact that everyone lists CISSPs and everyone lists certifications, but when someone gets into hand-to-hand combat, are they going to be able to think? Are they going to, all right, I do these 5 things that your procedure said, now what? Are you talking to a robot, or are you talking to someone that's going to be able to think? So those are a couple of my buyers. I also work with student groups at universities that are trying to build out their hacking clubs. We've helped one hacking club at University of North Georgia go from literally, probably none of you have ever heard of them. Most of you have never heard of them, but they went from nowhere north of Atlanta to dominating an NSA hacking competition for the last 2 years. So compellingly that if teams 2 through 10 had competed as one, they still would have lost the University of North Georgia. So, we help them find that talent, and we help them recruit it in. So then, and to people who are trying to get into industry, that was one of the most exciting results. They're like, a lot of people who joined the University of North Georgia team, they were like, I was thinking about being a philosophy major. I was thinking about criminal justice. And and someone said, well, let me try cyber. And they took this test, and the test said, I'd be good at that. But they're like, well, it's just a test. Okay, well, yes. But then they did become good at it. They started trying challenges, and then they stuck with it. So what was really exciting is University of North Georgia didn't win 1 year, they won 2. Because the team of people they found stuck because they liked it. And that goes right to the underlying principle of retention. If you do things that your brain likes, you want to keep doing it. So we help you find people who like solving the types of problems that your organization is going to pit them with.
Yeah. What about the reverse? Somebody who takes the test and figure out, okay, maybe cyber is not for them. Instead of like making the effort and studying, a 4-year computer science, or
and it might be that cyber isn't it, but there's all kinds of other dimensions. There's all kinds of other needs. But we're trying to, if someone's making a training allocation, if someone's got $50,000 to spend on training, and they, I've written the checks for those budgets, and I've been a beneficiary of those checks. And when you're spending that kind of money on training, off the top that you're losing 50% of it, because half of the people aren't going to matriculate and put those skills to work. So we help you make sure that the people that use those seats are going to be able to put that training to work. And frankly, not everybody should be in cyber, and I don't know if that's a mean thing to say or not, but not everybody should. And I'd rather we'll consider that we're doing a service to people to say, look, either if you really want to be in this, at least here's the roadmap of the things that you really need to focus on. You don't have good working memory. That's going to limit you on X, Y, and Z. If you want to increase your working memory, fantastic. If you want to be a leader in this, great. You're going to need to work on your psychomotor speed, working memory. You're going to need to work on these things. So any random kid show up and say they want to be Katie Ledecky. All right. You may have long arms and the right physique for it, but you still got to put the work in. And so this might give you a roadmap and that's how a lot of people use it. That's how University of North Georgia used it, and some of our client organizations, they use it to help them figure out where should people in the workforce be developing.
Cool. So how can somebody try it out if they wanted to? Like, what's the process? And what does the actual test look like? I mean, people are probably curious about.
Yeah,
You
so
know.
this is an example of one of the tests. And what we have here is, this is timed, this is a sample problem. So you're not getting a benefit here. But how quickly could you translate, the Arabic numerals? You take a series of encodings and then go back to the original Arabic numeral. And so for this particular test, it's called coding speed. You're given 2 minutes to cover as many as you can. This is really hard.
And can you, if you wanted to, like practice?
You're given a practice.
No, but if you wanted to like ace this exam, like, like the SAT, where like they have like, they teach you, like it's courses that teach you. Would you be able to take a course that teaches you how to be better at this?
No. So this is different than a knowledge test. This is an aptitude test. So the whole point of an aptitude test, a well-designed aptitude test, you can't study for. And the reason is we're going to stimulate parts of your brain in real time, and you're either going to respond or not. So I could tell you in advance what these binary encodings are. You could study them, and then I'm going to just change the encodings because that's what we do. Like, so no, one of the things that differentiates this is it was designed by cognitive psychologists who have been designing tests like this for decades. The Defense Language Aptitude, any former service or current or former? All right, so the Defense Language Aptitude battery, if you're going to take a language in the military, you take this test. And for many who don't, you took the test and the test recommended not language. And you can't study for it. It teaches you a language in real time in the test. It's not real, but you're going to have to find prepositions.
Like a Klingon?
It might have been, but you're going to have, they're going to give you a garbage sentence and they're going to say, which grunt was the preposition? And you're going to have to identify the preposition and the noun in it. So you can't study for it.
Yeah, and so this part of the aptitude, what's interesting about this is that you mentioned you can't really study for it, but it's skill set that you learn throughout, like you're growing up, right? So it's certain things that you've done growing up and obviously it's, probably half of it is genetics and half of it is the environmental, right? Or whatever, whoever, let's not argue about that, but,
Well, all right.
Right?
So, no, that goes to a really key question. A responsibility that we consider and a charter of the organization is to expand diversity in the cyber workforce. And one of the, when people see test, all kinds of heckles go up right away. And it's appropriate and we get it. And it has to do with, the SAT, and biased. And I don't think I'm surprising anyone to say it, and I don't have new data that other people don't already have. But because this test, and once you look at the test, you'll understand why it doesn't suffer from those biases. I'm not requiring advanced, understanding of language. You have to be able to read English to understand the instructions, but these problems, can you mentally fold a piece of paper in your head, punch a hole in it, and then unfold it? That's not a language, that's not an economic disadvantage question. This is, can your brain mentally fold a thing and unfold it?
What if you grew up in Africa without paper?
Well, you folded something. You had a.
I know,
but,
I'm joking, but
but the other thing is, but in all seriousness,
in the tribe, yeah, no.
In all seriousness, we did, for a bunch of the government contracts, we had to affirmatively demonstrate the non-bias. And so it's not just simply, trust me, I have a 73-page report with p-values and t-values and z-values of the statistics demonstrating non-bias with respect to the entire EEOC protected classes. So, sir.
When you approach security leaders or HR folks, how are you finding they receive this approach versus more of the traditional one that you described, CCNA, CISSP, CISM, AWS, Azure? Yeah,
no, so what people are really excited by is, and our pricing, and our pricing is based on the people you hire. So I don't charge per candidate. I charge, so if you got 10 hires, I charge you for 10 hires. And that you could test 1,000 people and I don't care. Now, the reason I say that is that gives our clients the ability to push the test downrange to essentially the top of their funnel. So people are very excited because when all I'm doing is looking at CCNA, there's only so many ways you can spell CCNA. It's CCNA. So that means that there's not a lot of differentiation when people are coming in your pipeline. And if what you list as the requirements are CCNA, CISSP, again, that's only 9 letters. So how are you creating differentiation? So they're extremely excited to be able to, because my pricing lets them push it downrange to the top of their funnel. They get to spend their time looking at the top quartile, depending on the client, the top quartile of people. And what we provide is a score report. And I know this is very busy, but the score report provides, did someone excel on the offensive disciplines, defensive, analytical, or dev and design? And so for whatever their position is, they'll focus on the top quartile of those candidates. They don't even have to waste anybody's time on the other 75%. And so being able to do that, we pay for ourselves simply on the saved hours there. And that's for a small organization. On a large organization, the savings go way up. Yes, sir.
So one of the big problems in the cybersecurity funnel with job shortage is that people don't give newcomers a chance, right? They're not giving them a shot, and they're
Very
giving
true.
them a chance to cut the teeth and grow up.
Yeah.
So how would this help me get around that?
Man, this is one of our most exciting projects. Is we're a part of the first check I wrote when I got my first investment was to Women in Cybersecurity, NYIS, and we're part of an internship program with them that it's going to be announced at the NYIS conference in September, but we are helping organizations see the potential in talent instead of, just a GPA. And I could go into the statistics that have demonstrated how predictive this is. We've got the statistics: 97% ability to predict who's going to become an elite cyber warfare operator for the Air Force, 77% effective for SOCOM, et cetera, et cetera. I've got the data, and I have the correlations to show it. So what we're able to do is show those people that might not have those credentials that you belong in this field. You can be successful in this field, and B, get the other side of the equation to say, yeah, you know what? My leader's time is important, and I want it spent on people who have the highest probability of being able to be successful in this field. And because, our brains like doing things that fit our brains. Like if you spend your time studying problems and doing challenges that your brain enjoys, you're going to want to stay in the field. And again, that's the result we saw with the University of North Georgia. I had no idea that they were going to have the effectively 100% retention rate of these kids that came from all different walks of life that stayed in cybersecurity and competed again and dominated again. And they're just getting their 3rd year of competition underway now. It's a 110-day competition. So my point is, these are kids that are committed and have made cybersecurity a real choice. So I think you're absolutely right. How to find those kids that weren't on radar and don't have the background. We're, as an organization, we are 100% committed to making the tent bigger. I mean, viewed cynically, a test is a gatekeeper, and our goal is not that. Our goal is make the tent bigger, find people who never would have considered cybersecurity, bring them in and say, we found the needle in the haystack. And, so that's really exciting.
We have time for one more
Please.
question.
There's one other element too. A lot of times people are very, very good at certain things, but they may not enjoy it. And there's an area that's in between. I like it and I'm good at it.
Right.
I'm good, I'm lousy. So is that taken into consideration also?
Yeah, we do find a lot of times the people that do the best, actually, they find that they really enjoy the tests. They come away going, wow, this is really cool. And so organizations have found recruitment that, they've found that organizations that are using this in recruitment is a plus, because they're like, oh, these challenges are really cool. And so I find this interesting. And again, the retention statistics suggest that when, you know, when people are doing these kind of challenges that fit with their brain, I mean, they really like it. And so, yeah, it's exciting.
It's always covered, that's covered, they go in taking the test, and maybe they do well, but I didn't enjoy it.
There isn't a separate question that we ask, did you like this? But, you know, but the feedback that we're getting, you know, is that they do, and they're, you know, getting jobs. So, you know, there's definitely depth to that question I could take that we haven't undertaken yet. I mean, we are an early stage company. The research is, you know, 5 to 8 years old, but we've only been commercializing it for the last 6 to 12 months. So we have to call our shots as an early stage company. So, yeah.
So the two use cases that I heard so far was prior to hiring, this would be like, you know, a test that you give an applicant, and then when you're running your security program and you're adding to your team.
Yeah.
This would be that. So in the second scenario, when you're adding or when you're trying to figure out where training is for people who are currently working in your organization, how do you think about, you know, if someone's having a bad day, the day they took that test, so are you giving the test over the course of a week?
So the test, you know, that's the manager's question. That's the manager's call. You know, it's 15 discrete elements that can be that individually are 5 to 15 minutes, and so they can take one. You know, you don't have to sit and commit to the whole thing all at once. You take one, take another, and some people, you know, a lot of our clients, when they're using it for their external facing hiring, they give their candidates a week to finish it. Just fit it in whenever. So, you know, again, separating for some of those test effects, you know, that is currently, you know, beyond our, that's a blind spot for us. I can't tell whether you're having a bad day or not. You know, I can pick up a mic and, you know, if you start cursing, depending on the intonation of the cursing, I might be able to discern one thing or another. Or the language of the cursing, I could discern other things. Exactly. No, and in Russian too. But no, I'm excited, you know, about this discussion. I know we'll be around. And let me.
Yeah, definitely. Like let's do that.
And there's let's see the last.
But it's super super interesting that this will allow people that are not necessarily you know, the ideal candidates to be able to prove themselves
right
as a perfect candidate.
And to use that as a basis of getting a company to take a shot on somebody and say, look, I really should do this, and these are the people I should lean into. And yeah, no, it's really exciting, and where the ground we're breaking with helping females enter industry, helping, you know, minorities enter industry, helping, you know, we're translating the test into foreign languages, where because the core cognitive concepts are not language based, so all we got to do is translate the instructions, and the cognitive concepts hold with other language instruction sets. Yeah.
I'm gonna make a point. Been in the industry about 11 years myself, and recently made a change about 3 months ago. I'm overwhelmed with recruiters calling me and begging me to go on interviews for jobs that really don't fit my overall requirements in terms of enjoyment and my skill set. So one of the things I've started doing is actually contributing more of my time to programs like BOCES in Westchester. It's an adult education, as well as it deals with some of the high school kids who probably aren't college bound, but
Yeah.
you know, looking at different programs, certifications, doing the CISSP, Cisco certifications, and so forth. And it's an opportunity to get them excited about potentially going down this path. Because
Absolutely.
we do get overwhelmed with people just knocking on our door and say, hey, would you like to go on another interview? It's like, no.
Right.
Just stop this job.
Right. No, and at an individual level, it's good for you if you keep getting your salary bid up. It hasn't. That's what causes, you know, undergraduates.
Throwing money at you.
Exactly.
That's not a problem.
Right. No, but it hasn't solved the macro problem of we're still missing millions of people, and so and that's why, you know, an undergraduate can turn down a $120,000 offer because I was the low ball, you know. So you know, I mean, that's the economic problem that we're trying to solve by figuring out who are the other millions of people that could come in And instead of spending $4 trillion to train them because you're going to burn 50% of it because you're training the wrong people, let's spend $1 trillion and train exactly the right people and get it right the first time.
You know, you work from home, you can always double dip.
There's 100. Listen.
I'm gonna blip this after.
Oh yeah, numerous. Yeah. You know, and I was gonna say you work from home. You know, to an entrepreneur, there's 168 hours in a week. That means you could do 4 full-time jobs and sleep 8 hours and honor all your commitments. It's 8 hours a week. What? Okay, that's a good week.
Like Schwarzenegger said, you know, you just sleep a little faster.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. So just grab the, let's turn this off and then let's grab the mic. Let's do the last session. Let's try this. You can take a 2-minute break until we do the next one. Let's do this. See, I'm shutting this down. Here, Mike, you.
Thank you.
And then just put it in your pocket.
I was pushing it in here. Just put it in my pocket.
Yeah. I was just like so.
Perfect.
We'll get going on that one. Okay, grab a bubbly.
I need some bubbly.
One second. Music.
You got the angles down?
Yeah, and I walked away from your phone and I was like, I hope you didn't need it.
No, I don't need it. I definitely don't need it. You can use your phone. You want to use your phone for the
Yeah.
text to me?
Yeah, it's already streaming
I
live.
think that'll suffice.
It's on meetup.com. If you go to meetup.com, I actually just posted a YouTube link. Yeah. And it's going to be recorded right on there. Okay, we'll get started. I'll just heard the cats. How do you pronounce the last name?
Hudisman.
Hudisman.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, we'll get started. Okay, let's sit down.
Okay.
So let's kick this off. And we have to clear this space by 8 o'clock. And then, but we're gonna go out to the local bar. I found another place. So I have the great pleasure to introduce Jeff Hudisman, who is a VP of Information Security at WorldPay, right?
Daily Pay.
Daily Pay. Sorry, I was Daily Pay. And you know what's amazing about VP of Information Security is that a lot of times it's a bit of an enigma. People are like, what does a VP of Information Security actually do? And and how do you become one? Because it's a big title. It's a big title. So why don't we get started? Maybe just give people a brief overview of how you got to where you are today. You have a really interesting background.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, thanks so much for having me. Yes, I've been in InfoSec for about 14 years. I was a computer science major in college, and I just so happened to fall into the industry. I worked at healthcare for a few years and really got the foundational knowledge I needed. And I really was super interested in. I mean, just seeing these adversaries and these initial, phone phreaking goes way back, but even just reading books about that and Kevin Mitnick and all this kind of stuff always really intrigued me. So I knew I wanted to get into this space. Not only creating use cases, but like how do we analyze and protect against abuse cases? So from there, I really situated myself in many different industries. I was in media, PR Newswire. I spent a lot of time at Sony. I know you're all thinking, well, that doesn't sound great, but I wasn't at Sony Pictures. But again, like a lot of the networks were interconnected, so there was a little bit of a headache there. And it was just a lot of great experience and a very diverse experience, because I feel like a lot of my peers in security will stay siloed in some area. They'll be pen testers, they'll be risk folks, or then they'll do certain specific things. I try to really diversify my knowledge set to which I'm able to at least speak intelligently about everything. And then when I got to that point, I knew that the CISO VP of InfoSec was really my next, my goal. And yeah, this role came up, and I was employee number, I'll say 80 or 90 of Daily Pay. And just for a quick overview, what Daily Pay is, we are a fintech, like HR tech company that gives employees of large employers. Some of our customers are like Target, Kroger, Clayton Homes, McDonald's. We have huge, some of the biggest companies in the world, give their employees early access to their earned wages. So they get paid bi-weekly, but let's say in a couple days in the pay period, they need money for gas, some kind of essentials. They're able to go into our app and just make a withdrawal and have that sent to their debit card immediately. And then voila, and then they're in good shape. So it runs very much counter to the payday loan industry, to which they charge crazy interest rates. This is just like a couple bucks like you'd pay at an ATM. So, but with that, there's a lot of obviously adversarial interest. So I'm sure we'll get into it.
Yeah, we'll cover that. You go ahead. Anybody other question? Okay, cool. So, what's exciting about your background, you almost strike me like the next generation of security professionals with diverse background, academically as well as, roles, because you've done some big organizations, large enterprise. You've been a consultant as well. And then you move into a fast-growing startup in a security role, which, by the way, it's not trivial. A lot of startups out there do not hire somebody like yourself until much later down the road. So why don't we talk about that specifically? What are kind of the challenges for a company that size? And then, since you already know the other side of being an established business, what are the differences between the two?
Yeah, I think there are pros and cons from a security standpoint. But when you're at a small company, and especially like Daily Pay, where the average age of employee is like 26 or something, to which they might never had experience at a larger company, where they know that you can't do certain things. You can't just like download any app you want on your laptop, and if you didn't have admin access, or you had admin access. So that's always a hurdle. But yeah, that's definitely a major difference than in being at a large company when things are, the policies are very rigid, everything is completely clear, security is really baked in, you would hope. I think one of the benefits of being in a smaller company, especially at Daily Pay as a very early employee, is the footprint of the network and what you're protecting is somewhat, you can conceptualize it. It's not like you're at as I said, Sony or a big bank where like you don't know where these things are. They're like, I remember hearing stories like there's like in other countries in like South America, there's a network and it's
shadow IT.
Yeah. Or there's like a firewall sitting on top of like a refrigerator, and that's like there's all sorts of crazy stuff you hear. So here, at least at employee number 80, I was able to really map out what we had and really start from the beginning, and I know this is like a cliche, but really baking security in and getting that culture out there and teaching people that this is important. I'm not saying that like security is going to be like the main part of your job. But if you're going to be using a new service that might be have implications with PII or to our bottom line, you need to involve us.
So did you inherit any legacy systems, or were you able to just go in there and pick the technology that you wanted to protect the organization? Or what was it like when you joined? Did you like just, what was your first 30, 60 days look like?
Sure. So it's definitely a little bit of both. And I always take that approach of doing that, maturity assessment, where I just kind of look at everything and see like where we're excelling and where we need work. We did have a lot of technology prior to me joining, not really security technology, but just infrastructure and like we use G Suite and things like that. Unfortunately, so my boss and the co-founder and CTO, Rob Law, he's a security-minded guy. I mean, like a computer science guy, Ivy League guy. So he knew the fundamental things you need to do. So like multi-factor authentication, you shouldn't have any like sensitive systems that don't have that. I mean, you'd be surprised how many companies, especially at our stage, that don't actually like have things like that. So we had core controls and things that we felt comfortable with, but then the processes and procedures and just the maturity of like repeating like access reviews and just all these things outside of the tech space, but also in the tech space as well, needed to be established and then followed. So that's kind of.
And what about when you come into the new role? I interviewed the past CISOs, sure. And they seems to try to create an impact on the first like 180 days. Mm-hmm. Just so they can get the trust from the organization and sure. the support they need. So you seemed like you had support from the founder, which is really great. But what were your like first couple projects? Yeah. And how did you decide to prioritize? Like, okay, you're coming into organization, maybe the basics are there, but what do you do next? Like, I mean, because I'm assuming that there's no manual. You don't come in and there's no employee manual. Okay, you're gonna have to do these 5 things the first 60 days.
Sure. Yeah. So as mentioned, the aforementioned maturity assessment, some of the things that I really wanted to focus on was our product. Because you think about like we have a product with hundreds of thousands of users, 7 figures of users, and these are some of the most non-tech savvy people out there. So they rely on our service. It's a hook into their payroll. And let's say they are using weak password or a repeated password for a lot of their services. And this is a very common attack, the whole credential stuffing. I'm not sure if anybody really knows what that is, but that's like if some of our adversaries will go to the dark web and pull tons of data of valid usernames and passwords, at least they were at some time, and they'll take that and then they'll try it on our site. And then they use some other tactics where they'll go to LinkedIn and find employees of our partners, like, for example, like a Target's a partner, as I mentioned, and they'll try and break in that way. So we had to develop solutions around that to prevent.
So did you interview the folks within the business? Like, how did you know even DailyPay? How did you know about the business? How long did it take you to really be immersed in terms of what you do and then be able to then go out and protect that?
Sure. Yeah, I think I was very fortunate, and that's something you mentioned earlier, that I was elevated to like the corporate risk committee and the executive committee. So I'm part of these discussions. I think that's truly one of the most valuable things you can do as a CISO of a smaller company. You need to be part of these decisions and you need to be part of these discussions because you can really easily nip things in the bud. If some, like all of a sudden, like the CTO, it's generally not the CTO because they're usually fairly security conscious. But you have like the marketing person's like, oh, how about we take all the PII and we do some other cockamamie thing with it? You need to be the voice of reason to be able to say, I definitely want to accomplish what you want to do because like, again, this is a business. We're not, it's not Fort Knox, but we need to do it in a responsible way. And it's a lot easier to do it there in that forum than it is once the vendors was chosen and it's like, they're already setting it up. So I think that type of embedding security into really the executive level is absolutely paramount, even in the early stage. I think it's a really rare thing, as we were saying. Like you said, like usually like companies will hire their security hire way later on. But I think it really is a positive thing to do it much earlier.
So, it's not the Lego movie and everything's wonderful. There's a lot of some difficult moments, right? So I'm sure you had successful projects and then, projects that were more challenging. Maybe you can help and provide some insight in terms of how you tackle those. Again, because I think people don't realize that with, a senior title comes more responsibility.
Sure.
And then you also become not a political target, but if something goes wrong, it's easier to point fingers. So maybe you can talk to me about that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think there's just going to be a little bit of conflict between like our product team and my team, because they're going to want to, release and push product and new functionality. And then we're going to be like, wait a second, like, not saying we don't want you to do it, like basically just like I said before, but like, let's just make sure that this is done properly. And it's like, well, wait a second, we don't need to really validate at this point. We could probably do it later. Or like how we don't think this is a problem, but it's like the way I approach this is like, we are the experts. My team, we're the experts. We're all looking after the same thing here. I mean, and like I've been fortunate where I think that I've articulated in a way where they get that. And they know that like if their, onboarding funnel gets torn apart and then our team has made several recommendations to do something a little differently, like it's not going to look great on them either. So that's really kind of how. So yeah, there's definitely a lot less than I thought there would be in terms of just adversarial, just like health security needs to go through security. I think the team, they realize, again, this is my first time in fintech and I love it. And I feel like I'll stay here forever. They see, I mean, I'll show metrics in my information security steering committee, which includes like our executive leadership, and we do that quarterly. I show metrics of how many times people are trying to break into our accounts, how many times we block there, and all those metrics. And I make sure that, the product folks and other relevant teams see this and they just go, let go. It's like they want to make sure that, we're doing everything we can.
So how was the first time you had to interface with executives, so I'm assuming you go into the board meetings, right?
Yeah.
So it's a big deal, right? To sit in front of the board and talk to them about security. So how do you, how were you your first time you've done this? And then what kind of culture are you trying to deliver as an organization? You mentioned that there's a whole fintech versus startup versus security kind of thing going on.
Sure.
So talk to me about that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I try and articulate a culture to which we are making prospective customers and prospects comfortable. Again, because we're in a space where we deal with the biggest companies in the world. So I'm on the phone with the CISOs of all these companies, and I need to assure them that we're doing the right thing. So that's something that, again, the board is obviously very interested in. Generally, the optics side of security at least matches up, I would say 50 to 60% with like actual security. So again, some things it's like that shiny new tool you saw at Black Hat at RSA, and it just solves all your cyber problems and like that kind of stuff. But like we really focus more around identifying where the threats are and what the risks are, and then if it's some kind of open source tool or it's something else, we'll do that. And yeah, I mean, I feel like our board has been very interested in things like insider threat. They're very interested in fraud on the platform, as I mentioned, in terms of the credential stuffing. And we found, I mean, again, like I think something you mentioned earlier in terms of like a win, and like a major win for me was articulating, and this was a tough thing to do, but articulating to our executive leadership saying that we're not seeing it now. We're not getting hammered by Russia, by Eastern Europe, but it's going to happen once we start doing another raise. We just raised, 500 million. So like it's going to get out there, and they're going to know we have money, and they're going to want to come after us. So we put a system in place to do this very intelligent identification of users and seeing anomalies. This user usually logs in from New York, now they're logging in from somewhere else with a different device. Like maybe we treat that differently. We challenge them. We lock their account, make them reset. And that just was like perfect timing, because then I would say a few months after we deployed that, we just got slammed. And had we not have gotten slammed, that would have been a catastrophic.
Yeah, it
loss
reminds me of something you said like in one of your past interviews. You mentioned that everything seems overblown until something happens.
Yeah.
So, and I'm I don't want to steal your thunder, but just say.
No, it's true. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, everything is just, it's not going to happen to us, kind of thing. And then all of a sudden it does, and they're like, well, why don't we have something? So that's
So, in your opinion, what are kind of the biggest threats currently that facing fintechs in general, and then specifically a company your size? Because it seems like large enterprise can survive breaches, and they just pay the fine, they move on. But a company your size, despite the $500 million in funding, is still considered vulnerable from that perspective. So
of course,
what are kind of the top things currently that are top of mind for you in terms of risks?
Yeah, so I think application security and making sure our exposed infrastructure is impenetrable as possible. I think that's a big one. And then just like the business logic around, again, what happens if someone's trying to brute force into an account, and even if someone successfully, because again, no one's perfect. Banks aren't perfect, but let's say you have a user that's able to, like an adversary is able to get into a legitimate account, then what can we do there to prevent additional adversarial activity? So maybe, they maybe have seen some PII, and that's an issue, and we'd have to do a disclosure potentially on a contract and whatnot. But how can we prevent? Maybe we can prevent them from making a transfer, making any monetary changes. So we developed a lot of controls around that. We're doing very sophisticated analysis of debit card BIN numbers to see like certain BIN numbers from different countries, from different areas might pose a bigger risk. So that would factor into the risk equation. So we're trying to treat ourselves like we are the banks, because I know that the adversaries out there, the ones in Eastern Europe and in Russia, at least they're the ones that are targeting us the most. They see fintech as low-hanging fruit, and they're probably not wrong, at least in the broader sense. But I told executive leadership, and I said, we're not going to let that happen. We're going to make sure that we are doing what the banks are doing, if not even more. So.
And how do you measure whether you're successful or not? Aside from obviously, not being breached or being breached and not, surviving that, how do you measure that, success factors? And then you personally, and then how does the board measure you as well in that regard?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm a huge proponent of red team and penetration testing and anything I could do to simulate adversarial activity, and very advanced adversarial activity. Because I'm sure many in this room have worked with firms that have done pen tests, and it's almost like it kind of looks like a vulnerability scan, maybe with like a little bit of human validation. So I make sure that the ones that I hire, they're not all government, but a lot of the government folks happen to be pretty good at this, obviously. So we hire firms that are really going to just hammer every aspect, and we do it not in a complete black box way. We'll do it like gray box, where I want them to know where points that we are concerned about are, so then they can poke at them. So I want them to break it as opposed to some adversary. So that's definitely something that we make sure that we do regularly. And in terms of another thing that the board and executive leadership are hot on, as I mentioned, is access reviews and onboarding and offboarding. It was one of those, I remember saying this in one of my audit committee meetings. I was like, I'm less concerned about like a 0 day, like some kind of sophisticated 0 day, than I am about like just not properly offboarding an engineer that's disgruntled and then is able to steal code or steal other proprietary.
Yeah, it's back to the basics, right?
Back to the basics. And it's a very tricky thing, because we're, right now we have over 500 employees, but even when we were smaller, back to the culture I was describing earlier, where I just think that, it was a bit of a free-for-all in that, like, everybody wanted to do, like, it's shadow IT. Everyone wanted something new. It's like, hey, Jeff, is this cool? Can we do this? This is when, like, I was just the only hire. And, like, it just got to the point where, we do a little cursory, like, do they have a SOC 2? Where exactly is the data going? Is there anything glaring? And and the answer is no, then we're probably going to let them, go forward. And again, that's maturing now. I have a staff that is doing, vendor assessments, and then we pride ourselves in those. But it's definitely obviously a big challenge.
So you mentioned SOC 2. Do you find value in all those certifications that, security certifications for the company themselves and audit? And I'm assuming since you deal with a large enterprise, you've been asked that.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you deal with that being audited by these large enterprise?
Sure. So I think without SOC 2, I don't think we have any customers. So I think that's like, so I think that's extremely important. And I also wanted to, something that's funny. Jason Lee, who's our CEO, I remember he came up to me in like the first, my first couple of weeks, and he's like, how can we make, this a competitive advantage? How can we separate ourselves? And again, that's not going to imply like, we like put on the website, we are the most secure. And I'm sure you see that in some vendor sites. It's like, we're unhackable. I saw that on some financial website recently. I'm like, okay. And my CFO is like, we want to use this. I'm like, we are not using this. But
it's also like he's putting like a target on your back.
Exactly.
Like you don't want to do that either.
Exactly. But I do think that SOC 2 is valuable. Again, like, is it perfect? No, but it does give some teeth behind some very important controls. So for certain things, if you have some like developer that's just like really, not really security conscious, though he's doing what he has to do, but he's not going to go anymore. We can say, well, this is a SOC 2 requirement. Our prospects and partners are not going to go with us if we don't satisfy this. Like, you need to do this. So it just gives some of that teeth. So I find that valuable. We also attained ISO 27001, which is very similar to SOC 2, just because we might soon have international presence, and that has a lot of weight over there. But I do find a lot of value in those things. It is a it's an attestation from a third party, so it's not biased. It's not just saying like, well, Jeff and his team says they're secure. Like, I mean, like, though I believe myself and my team, but it doesn't mean that much. So
that's cool. So and what about in terms of technologies? Do you is there any particular technology you like and you find exciting in this space? Or again, coming back to the original question about being a startup and being able to potentially deploy technologies that are more cutting edge because you're not necessarily like an older, very large organization.
Sure.
Right. So anything exciting that you're working on right now?
Yeah. I mean, I'll just like disclaimer, I am an advisor of this this company, but there's one thing that we use at Daily Pay. And so the company's called Phylum. But there are other vendors who do the same thing, like Sneak or Snick. I'm not sure. Snick. And what was a huge concern for us, especially with all these like Magecart and other supply chain issues, it's paramount that we understand the dependencies that we're using. I feel like previously, even like a few years ago, like no one even thought of that. It's okay, so we're using all these open source code, like this is great, and like it all works. But then like, let's say the maintainer went rogue, someone paid the maintainer off, and now all of a sudden there's like embedded code in there. So these solutions, and Phylum does this exceptionally well. They'll look for malware. They also look at the open source tree and see what dependencies is this using, and like it just kind of looks at the entire open source ecosystem for any prospective malice, and then it'll come up with a risk score, and then long story short, and then like and this gets embedded into Git. It's GitHub, and then if someone tries to make a commit, then it'll say, wait a second, you didn't pass because there's a certain risk. It just needs to be reviewed by the security team. Things like that, I think, are immensely valuable. We also leverage something called Salus. It's a Coinbase open source product that does a bunch of different security checks for it gets integrated into like the CI/CD pipeline just to check for like dangerous strings and other dangerous dependencies and things like that, which has been valuable, especially at a smaller company and being in at a startup. It's these technologies where we can wedge ourselves into very, very important parts of the very important processes gives us immense value. So.
Yeah, it's super cool. First of all, it's amazing to hear you talk about technology, and you can tell you're passionate about it.
Yeah.
And then you can tell that you found a blind spot that you had, and you
Totally.
managed to fix that with technology. What about some of the, and we'll open up for questions as well. What about some of the new, we hear some of the buzzwords like machine learning, AI, or it's not really AI, it's artificial intelligence, AAI. What else is out there right now from that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, and then actually this goes back to your past question too.
Yeah.
So one thing that we use a product called Castle.io. And so when I was mentioning before about the credential stuffing and people trying to log into our site, but without also not adding too much friction, what Castle will do is it's a service to which someone tries to log in. We take characteristics from that login, like let's say, again, weird browser, not in the geolocation. And Castle will determine and say, this is a high risk or this is a medium, and then we can take action. So the person tries to log in, then maybe we give them like a two-factor, like you have to, two-factor, or we just lock their account. And that is based on a lot of machine learning. It's understanding kind of what is their perception of normal. And so yeah, I mean, I think in those types of implementations, machine learning is great. I mean, I think we all know here that like 90% of the machine learning claims from vendors is a little bit overblown. But we have seen literally tremendous value from this because and again, I'm sure there are other products that do the same thing, but this gives us the ability to make it easier for our users to use the product, not introduce too much friction, but we're also going to block out the bad guys, and which we are. We're seeing thousands and thousands of blocks. So it gets to the point where it's funny. Like whenever I tell like an executive, I'd say like, it's like you're getting chased by a bear and you just want to be faster than your friends. Like that's like kind of how I like look at this.
So do you ever turn your phone off ever?
Oh yeah, that would be great if I could, but never.
Well, it's interesting, and it's also interesting you mentioned that security is now becoming a competitive advantage a bit, especially when you're talking about fintech.
Totally.
Right. So let's open up for questions.
With your, I'm sure you're involved a lot in your decision-making process and who to select as vendors. How do you weigh the actual technology itself and the person that's representing the company and establishing the trust between that vendor and you? How do you weigh between establishing trust between that particular person and the technology itself? Do you like a product, but you don't really trust this vendor just based on their ability to deliver? How do you do that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mean, I think the person definitely contributes a lot to it. But I mean, the technology obviously, I think if we did a demo and there was a lot of support from the vendor and they were just very open-minded and were working with us to show the value, I think that's a great thing. So yeah, I think it's really both. I think I've dealt with, speaking of castles, we do use those. I just mentioned them. Like their account representative was just fantastic. Like he was there, and if he didn't know the answer, he was going to get it somewhere. I mean, if we saw something anomalous and something we thought might be like a kink in the product, like he would make sure that he got the, and then he would link us up. Even I remember the CEO, and they're fairly large. I think we have like 60 or 70 employees. So like that's just an example. So yeah, I mean, I think it's the person and the technology are both absolutely essential.
Good.
You mentioned security being a competitive advantage, and this is a long-winded question, but I want to show you what I mean. So security is certainly a competitive advantage. You brought up SOC 2 certification, you brought up some of those other things.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about, or what is your approach in the business of convincing people to pay for that? What I mean by that is SOC 2 is required.
Mm-hmm.
In your space, you have to do that.
Yeah.
But if I'm a user and there's one company that is SOC 2 certified and they look, feel, and they smell a lot like you, but they're 50% less, but you spend 100% more on security, and my $2 that I'm going to pay this person my transaction is going to be less safe than if I pay you $4.50. How do you feel like as an industry, fintech specifically, to go out and convince people that it's beyond just SOC 2. We've gone more than the minimum, and that's why we can ask for a higher price. It's a long question.
That's a great question.
What I'm asking is, how do you convince people at the transaction level that the money you're spending on security is worth them paying more? Because I would imagine it's challenging to charge more for the product. I mean, that's challenging to keep your prices what they are if you're implementing all these different security controls. So SOC 2 is kind of the minimum.
Yep.
You're doing obviously a lot more. So how do you convince people that all these processes and these things you're doing are worth it for them to pay for?
Yeah, I mean, I almost think sometimes it's the contrary, where I think, not like we've ever been accused of like not spending enough, but I think these companies, if they're going to use a service like ours, to which there is PII involved, they want us doing anything possible. So they would actually like, be like, we'll pay. I mean, like that hasn't happened yet, but like they want more and more. So it's not something that they would find value in. And if we didn't have these certifications and we didn't have these special things, they would just not consider us. And especially given our customer base, they're all in like the Fortune 500, Fortune 50, to which they wouldn't accept anything that is I guess a serious controls and a security posture that's less than what they are. So that's why that stuff is so important.
Fortune 50.
Yeah.
They're a little slower.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And I don't see them as, and like, it's funny. It's like, I don't see those companies having come from them as any more secure. I mean, you hear all these stories with Cabinet, not singling them out, but like Capital One and all these other breaches. Like, it's just funny how much they spend on security and kind of what happens. Again, not saying it can't happen to startups, and that just is what it is, but it's just something that we take a very threat-based approach.
Jeff, you seem like a really calm human for someone who works in security.
Yeah. I don't know. I just got I guess a long night's sleep and just a lot of alcohol. No, I'm kidding.
I just have a question. Like you were saying that you are getting a debit card PIN numbers, and you are blocking all those IP addresses from Eastern Europe and Russia.
Oh, so yeah, so that's actually, there's like a multi-faceted approach there where Castle, the system, does an analysis of where things are coming from and should this account be, using a certain browser and that kind of stuff, just by pattern and trends. But we also use like other controls where, like, if we don't do business in like Eastern Europe, we could just block off those countries. Again, that's nowhere near effective because it's not hard to just use IPs in the US or elsewhere, but it does like slow things down a little bit. So we just try to cover where we can, and yeah, just like that whole cliche, the defense in depth, but it served us well, and I think we're constantly looking for anomalies. We have constant touch points with our support team, and they have like a subset of fraud team. So if they see anything weird, like, wait a second, why is this debit card showing up in these multiple accounts? Like, we make sure that we address all of these weekly. It's these small little things. If someone's found a loophole, we need to make sure we touch on that ASAP.
One more question, and we can wrap up.
So I wanted to ask, you deal with executives and board members too, right? So what are the extra security practice that you implement on them, or maybe whichever executives are non-technical, how do you implement more security, or any, how do you make sure that they are not sharing any information, or they are not, how do you make sure that they are secure for your company?
I'm sorry, making sure who's secure?
So if your executives and your board members, like how do you go and what are the steps you take for them to make sure that you and your company is secure?
Sure. Yeah. So.
Personal devices and for any devices.
Yeah, it's always a tricky thing in terms of administrative technology and like where people. I think this is your question. So in terms of like where do they store data and like using certain cloud services and like unauthorized cloud services and things like that. So we do have controls in place to ensure that only certain places are used for cloud storage or used for sending secure email and all that kind of stuff. But we are slow, and it's something because I know the banks and government agencies will literally use many different technologies and protocols to you can't go to social media, you can't do all this kind of stuff. To which we're not quite there yet, just because the culture of a startup, people are not going to be happy about that. But yeah, we make awareness and training is huge, and we make sure that departments through the aforementioned security committee, and it has to trickle down to every department where people need to follow our policies, or there is going to be disciplinary action taken.
Yeah, and I think executive used to be the worst offenders, but I think things have changed.
Yeah, I think. I'm sorry. So that's what you asked about. Executives. Yeah, things have absolutely changed. And I think, and I do recall previously being at maybe not larger companies, but earlier in my career, the executives just want to make their own rules. And I remember one COO wanted to use his AOL account or something, and things like that. So that's definitely changed. I think our executives are as good, if not better, than our regular employees.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. Much
thank you so
appreciated.
much.
Thank you. So we're out of time. Again, you're more than welcome to join. We're gonna walk over. I'll look up the address and I'll let you guys know. And this is exciting. Hopefully, it's gonna be one of many. Looking forward to seeing you here or some other location where we're gonna find some space. And looking forward to seeing you at the next event. Thank you very much for coming today. Thank you.